Hey everyone, it's Blake, and welcome in to the 411 on Wrestling Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we welcome back our friend Steve Cook to discuss our favorite Survivor Series teams in WWE history. Steve and I go through and break down and rank our top 10 individual ones. And yes, we have some that are a little bit of the same. We have some different ones, but lots of different Survivor Series teams discussed in our rankings. And we also talk a little bit about the Zelina Vega situation at the end of the podcast, talking about her release, where things go from here for other talent, and just the state of how WWE is approaching this entire situation with their third-party policy and all of that. So, great discussion as always with Steve, focused mostly around Survivor Series and some of our favorite teams from the history of Survivor Series. So lots of good nostalgia in here if you're someone who wants to reminisce on some of the great moments in Survivor Series history and some of the best teams. So let's go ahead and jump into the conversation with 411's Steve Cook. All right, as promised, our guest today is, once again, Steve Cook, back yet again here on the podcast, as we have something very exciting in store, as I mentioned in the intro. But, Steve, are you ready for this ultimate Survivor Series ranking here of the teams? Because I have a feeling you and I are not going to have any of this year's Survivor Series teams on any of our top 10.
Well, we don't know. Do we know any of the teams full yet? Okay, yeah, Team Raw. I guess we know the male Team Raw. And no, male Team Raw did not make my list.
Yeah, it's not on my list either. And I will say I don't think there are any Team Raws here from the past, however many years it's been now, that are on my top 10. I will say that up front. All right, let's start with this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to count it down from 10. So Steve's going to start. We're going to start with his number 10, and we're just going to alternate all the way to number 1. And I think one thing I want to throw out here, Steve, and I don't know if you have this on your list, because if you do, it's fine, but I want to point out, I did not include the mega tag teams from like the late 80s on there. So what was that, 87, 88? I think you had just the massive tag team matches where you had like 7 tag teams on one side. It was like a 50-man elimination match.
And they did it once or twice also in the last few years. They also had like the tag team stuff. And no, I don't have any of those on my list because when I look at those teams from top to bottom, there's always like 1 or 2 teams that's kind of iffy.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah.
Like I can't really see putting these guys on there. Like, I mean, God bless you if you like Conquistadors, but we're not going to be on my list.
That was the example I was going to bring up. I was going to say Conquistadors were probably that team that although I think they made it to the finish of the one.
They did.
87
they had
or 88?
A nice long run.
Yeah.
I think it's 87. They had a nice long run in that match, much to the surprise of everybody. And I think was that also a year where the Rougeos and the British Bulldogs were on the same team after Jacques had sucker punched Dynamite Kid.
I think that may have been 88. I need to look back at that one, but yes, that was
which got a lot better in my eyes once I heard about the whole story.
Yes, no, they were. It's interesting to think about that when they were in the ring together. Like they were actually pretty good. I remember they had the tag team match, and it's good stuff. So. We'll let you, you're the guest here. We're going to let you start first, Steve, with your number 10 choice. And I will just bring up, we'll just kind of keep going through these, and we'll probably have the same ones on some of these, but we'll just bring them up when we get to them on our list. So your number 10 starts things off.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to tell you straight up that there's going to be quite a representation from 1989 on my list because I was watching Primetime Wrestling not too long ago, which currently leads up to 1989. I think they might have added some more on the network. Not sure, but
I think they did.
Yeah, I think I'll have to get back on that. But I was digging that 1989 Survivor Series build, and one of the most interesting teams to me from that particular show, known as Rowdy's Roddies.
Yes.
Yeah, Rowdy's Roddies. Yes, it was of course Hot Rod, Roddy Piper. The Bushwhackers, Luke and Butch. I mean, when you think Rowdy, you think the Bushwhackers.
Right.
And then another guy who's completely out there, and a man with an interesting history of Roddy Piper, say the least, the Superfly, Jimmy Snuka. It was a collection of characters, to say the least. I mean, those 4 guys. I mean, they're just, you want to talk about nuts, talk about crazy folks, talk about Rowdy. Yeah, those guys fit the bill. I'm pretty sure they didn't win their match at Survivor Series, but I don't care about that part. They're still making the list.
Yeah, they faced a team at that Survivor Series in '89 that's going to be very high on my list. I'm just going to tell you right now, spoiler alert. The team they face, which I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this now know who that is, but I'm not going to say it yet. But it will get mentioned here. But yes, I love the promos too. Of course, you just know that you got Piper, you've got Snuka, you've got the Bushwhackers. Yeah, this was just when things were nuts. Yeah,
and in a good way too. It's a good way, good crazy, because sometimes crazy can be kind of annoying and tough to watch, but this was the good crazy.
Let's just point out too, like with '89, and we'll have some, I'm sure, with some of the other. I have one from '87. I think I have two from '87 on here. But this was also when Vince McMahon was just the promos leading up to this, like him just screaming these out, like in the early part of the show, like he's just introducing everyone, and he's just screaming their names. Like, just that was insane too. So I wish he still did that. Maybe that would add a little bit of.
One of my favorite things Vince ever did back in the day was he would, especially for like the Royal Rumble. The Royal Rumble was great for that too, because he would just be screaming every single name in the damn match. And of course, WrestleMania and all that. Just great stuff from Vince.
Yeah, Haku. Like he would take him 5 minutes to complete Haku, I think, and so he was great when he did that. All right, my number 10 is a team that had some dysfunction. Not surprising, given two of the overall the main players, I guess, probably in this one. I went back to what was a terrible show, 1994 Survivor Series, like just an awful show. But I'm going to pick the Teamsters just because of the accumulation of talent that they had on the Teamsters, which was Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Jeff Jarrett, Owen Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. I don't. Again, that show was bad, and this team even lost because I think you had Michaels and Diesel had their thing, and
they had a falling out, which led to Diesel winning the title not too long afterwards.
Yeah, so that was one of those where I think you look at the accumulation of talent, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of talent on here, and it was a unique pairing just because you did have. You had Michaels and Owen and, Jarrett's in there, and there's just lots of interesting. So I'm going to go with them at number 10. I almost thought that I may have underrated them a bit, but I don't know. Just that 94 one's just one that kind of stands out to me as like, oof, it wasn't great.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the main event did feature the immortal Chuck Norris.
Yeah, that is true. I always forget about the main event because I'm thinking Survivor Series. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that was the match with Chuck Norris. Yeah. Oh,
of course, then Bret Hart and Bob Backlund was at like a 95-minute submission match. At least it felt that long anyway.
Yeah, that one went 30-plus minutes for sure. But I went with that one. Again, I don't know. It's kind of one of those teams that talent-wise they're there. All right, number 9, yours.
Number 9, you mentioned how you didn't have any Team Raws on your list. I do have one Team Raw on my list here from 2016. I couldn't turn it down because the collection of talent on this team and some storytelling going on at the time as well. You had big old Braun Strowman, who had yet to kind of establish himself as the monster among men, but he was working his way up the ranks, becoming a force to be reckoned with. Then you had good old Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens. This was back when they were doing their big friendship deal, and just one of the great friendships in wrestling history that unfortunately didn't last. It lasted a few months longer. It's tough to talk about now, honestly. Still, the emotion behind that breakup is still kind of tough for me to deal with. In addition to those men, you also had two former Shield members in Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
And as I recall, they did wind up coming up a little bit short, and I believe that Jericho and Owens blamed Reigns and Rollins for it. So
makes sense.
There you go. But I was just looking at teams from top to bottom, and that one's a pretty darn difficult one to argue with. I'm not sure who you would call the weak link there.
Yeah, that's pretty. I had that on my honorable mention. I had 5 on my honorable mention ones, and I won't even bring them up until we get done, just to see if you have some of these, and I may just kind of mention it if you add some of these. But I did have 2 Team Raws on my honorable mention. I had that one, and I had the one from 2017, which was, I think it was Triple H, Kurt Angle, Strowman, Samoa Joe, Finn Balor. But I guess Triple H in 2017, maybe he's the weakest link on that one. Or Angle, I guess, is probably with 2017 But
I remember hating the booking of that match show because
it was bad. Yeah,
that was brutal. Anything featuring Triple H wrestling in the past 5 years or so, it's just been brutally booked. It's terrible.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's why at first I was like, man, that's a lot of talent, but I thought back, I was like, yeah, this wasn't great. So yeah, I left him off my list too. But that's a good one. I didn't even think about that putting that one. I had it on my honorable mention, but I was like 2016. It's again, some of this stuff too runs together, and I'm just thinking back to like, man, these last 5 years have been tough to figure out. Some of these run together with that. All right, number 9. I think you're going to have this one higher on your list, and I think maybe like you, I have a lot of 80s ones that are going to be pretty much towards the top of this list, but I have this one at number 9, and that is Team Guerrero, Eddie Guerrero, John Cena, Rob Van Dam, Big Show, 2004. I just thought, again, if you're talking about stacking talent, that's a pretty stacked deal there with just everyone involved. Eddie in 2004, well documented. Cena, 2004, same thing. I know RVD even then was still in Big Show, kind of what that. So I thought that was a really fun team, the 2004 Survivor Series.
Yeah, I forget if we already decided if we're going to just because I do have that team a little bit higher on my list.
We can just say that. We can just kind of tease it that you're going to have them higher, and then we'll get to them when we get there. But
okay,
yeah,
and then I'll talk more about it later because I have another reason why I ranked them so high, which we will get to.
Interesting.
That's a teaser.
Teaser. We're going to put that, if you want to skip ahead, you'll see that in the show notes, the timestamps. All right, number 8 on your side.
Well, possibly the most important Survivor Series of all time might have been in 2001. Which, yes, of course, had a big blow-off to the invasion with the WWF taking on the Alliance. And if you're wondering why the WWF wound up winning the whole thing, because, well, other than it's WWF, duh, you take a look at this team that they put together for their big winner-take-all match. You got The Rock, you got Chris Jericho, you got Undertaker, you got Kane, you got Big Show. Folks, there's not a weak link there. Maybe, I guess you call Big Show maybe kind of, Big Show has ups and downs through the years. 2001 maybe was not one of his better years, but that's still a big old 500-pound hoss to have on your team. And, of course, Rock was on fire. And, Taker and Kane were together as the Brothers of Destruction. They were getting along fine. Jericho was he's approaching the point where he become the undisputed champion. So it's easy to see why the WWF came out on top when that's the team they're rolling out there. And the Alliance was dumb enough to have Shane McMahon on their team. Come on, man. You just got to do better than putting yourself in the match. I never understood that part.
I was just about to say, I was going to bring that up. I was going to say, all right, so Team WWF, you've got The Rock, Jericho, Undertaker, Kane, Big Show. The Alliance, you had Austin, Angle, Rob Van Dam, Booker T, and Shane McMahon. Like, there's one person in there that stands out like a sore thumb, and I think it's pretty clear that it's got to be Rob Van Dam, right? It's not Shane.
And it also annoyed me with the Alliance booking, of course, that Austin and Angle were the focal points when even Austin was in WCW and ECW. Nobody thought of him as anything other than WWF guy.
Yeah.
And Kurt Angle, obviously WWF guy, and it just kind of showed the way they booked that whole thing, where they brought in all these newer guys. They didn't bring in the big names, and at a certain point they just decided, okay, these guys aren't getting over, so we're just gonna put Austin in front of it. And yeah, that's one of the many reasons why I think didn't quite work out.
The high point of the Alliance had to be the first night, and then I think from there everything sort of went backwards a little bit.
Oh, when ECW came out, that was great. But then when ECW announced that their new owner was Stephanie McMahon, that sunk it.
No,
it was done after that.
You had that first, like, I can remember, like, it's one of those wrestling moments, like, I remember exactly where I was watching that Raw. Like, I was like, man, this is incredible. And then after that, as you said, it just sort of started going backwards a bit. But I will go ahead and say I have that one higher on my list as well. So we'll get to them, my list here in a bit. All right, my number 8, man. What a group here. And if you take out Brutus the Barber, if you take out Hacksaw Jim Duggan, I guess. But 1987, it was Beefcake, Jake Roberts, Duggan, Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, 1987 Survivor Series. That team right there, my goodness, like that's a group. And I remember back, I think they beat the team, which was not a great team on the other side. They beat Honky Tonk Man, Hercules, Harley Race, Danny Davis, and Ron Bass. But wow, what a group that is. Like, that's sort of your... obviously Savage won the WWE title and was a main event guy, but all these guys, like, just had that sort of... I don't know, like, they are just like your... I don't even know what the best way to put it. Like, they're your WWF, like, late 80s guys. Like, all these guys, like, they're in this group with Beefcake, Jake, Duggan, Savage, and Steamboat. This was quite a team here.
Yeah, absolutely, and a team I have a lot higher on my list because I'm a fan of these guys. I mean, the Macho Man, the Dragon, the Snake, I'm a Hacksaw, Brutus. And I don't mean denigrate Brutus Beefcake too much because obviously not on the level of these other guys. But if you go back and watch those shows around this time, that man was over.
Yeah,
the Barber was an over character. People liked him.
Yeah, he was
popular man.
He was never my favorite either, but I was the one that got pissed off whenever he beat Perfect at WrestleMania, and I was like, oh, come on, this is just, man, not my guy, Perfect. But that's all right. Perfect's going to get the better of him here in our rankings because his team's higher from one of his groups. So
there you have it.
Yeah, that's all that matters, right? All right, down to your number 7.
We're going to 1993. I remember this is a pay-per-view that as a child I was very excited about, and I was very sad that my parents wouldn't fork over the $29.95 or whatever the hell it was to watch it because, I don't know, I was all about some of these matches, and some of them don't age very well. 1993 WWF doesn't age very well in general, but when you take a look at the main event of the show, you had the Foreign Fanatics taking on the All-Americans. You take a look at the roster of the All-Americans. You got Made in the USA Lex Luger, of course. I mean, the total package. The man was all about America at this point in time. You had the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, of course. It's weird. Anytime you see the Steiner brothers on the WWF card, it's like that doesn't compute.
Yeah,
it's a weird thing. It's been that way for Scott Steiner's whole career, where it feels like WWE was one place where Scott Steiner didn't work.
Right.
Everywhere else, he was great. But whatever reason, he never connected with this particular company. And then I remember originally that Tatanka was supposed to be the 4th All-American. He was taken out of action by Ludwig Borga in the build-up to the show. And he couldn't go. He couldn't compete. So Luger and Steiners pulled a rabbit out of their hats, and they got themselves The Undertaker, the dead man.
Yes.
And I remember to this day when they did the big interview, and the Undertaker comes out. And the Undertaker, he raises his robe, his jacket, and like on the inside, you see an American flag. It's like, hell yes, that is America right there. And of course, later on, Undertaker became the American badass. We all know about his patriotic credentials these days. So, but I mean, that's a strong foursome right there: Luger, Undertaker, Steiners.
Yeah, they were on my honorable mention list, so I did have them in there, but I don't know. I just found these other teams, but yeah, like you said, I remember back to that show, and of course, I think everybody sort of remembers the match with the Hart family, and of course Shawn and the Knights and all that other stuff. It seems like that's the one that gets talked about a lot, but people sort of forget about this as the main event with Luger and kind of where he was at that point. But yeah, that was pretty interesting with that one. Of course, you said the Foreign Fanatics, Crush, Jock in there, Borga and Yokozuna. There's an interesting.
Yes, I recall Pierre got taken out in the build-up. They did some angles leading up to the show where people got taken out, and I want to say that Crush was a replacement there.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so
because that was around the time where Crush had turned on Macho Man.
That was an interesting time period. I want to go back and watch some of that because I know some of it was
stuff
just
going on. Yeah,
some of it was terrible, but they actually had some pretty interesting stories in terms of where things went.
Yeah, that Savage Crushing was a really interesting story. Even though, I mean, it's kind of weird. I'm sure it's got to be the best thing Bryan Adams ever did. I mean, yeah. Unless you can think of something.
Well, that's probably it because it certainly wasn't Undertaker and Kane versus Chronic at Unforgiven 2001.
Whoa, boy.
You talk about it. Listen, I said earlier, you talk about a match that I knew where I was when I watched that match. I knew where I was when I watched that one too because probably not for the good reasons.
For different reasons,
yes,
completely.
Completely different, but yes. But yeah, I would agree. Probably a good point of his career there for Crush. All right, my number 7, this team, and look, just as you said, in the 80s, 89, just one of those years where these were all my guys. Like, I love these guys, and I know one of them, was the ultimate babyface, and I am going with the Hulkamaniacs at number 7. Hogan, Jake Roberts, Axe and Smash. I love Demolition. I know everybody talks about Demolition when it comes to the Road Warriors and all this other stuff, and I'm not saying that they were better than the Road Warriors or anything like that, but I love these guys, and so I look back at this team and I'm just like, man, look at all this group. It's such interesting. Like, I think anytime Hogan teamed with anyone, it's like, oh yeah, like Hogan and Jake and Hogan and Axe and Smash, and I don't know, it was almost like he was teaming with three guys who were pretty much ultimate heels at times, but still, I just thought this was a hell of a team here between Hogan, Jake, and the Demolition.
Well, we can go ahead and do a seamless transition right now because my number 6 team just happens to be Hulk Hogan, Jake Roberts, and Demolition.
Look at this.
So there you go, seamless transition, right? Pretty good.
Perfect.
Pretty good. I liked it because I don't recall any other times where Hulk Hogan, Jake Roberts ever teamed up.
Yeah.
I don't think that happened elsewise. I remember when they were going to have a feud, and there's the whole business where Jake DDT'd Hulk Hogan, and apparently the fans liked it. They chanted DDT, and Hulk Hogan kind of put the ixnay on that whole program. That wasn't going to happen. So other than that, that's the only time they ever interacted. And Hulk Hogan was able to trust Jake Roberts here, and Axe and Smash were at the height of their powers here. And we all know, yes, they were a derivative of the Road Warriors / Legion of Doom. But no, unlike a lot of those teams that were just two painted up roid guys and weren't very good. You got Bill Eadie there. Bill Eadie can work.
Yep.
Barry Darsow could work. I mean, these are two guys who could put it together. And the only problem I have with it today is when you look back now, it's the wardrobe's a little too weird kind of weird stuff going on for me. It's a little kind of stuff you see in certain kinds of films, if you get my drift.
Yeah. If you go back and look at some of that stuff, definitely from that area, it wasn't just them. There was a lot of them, probably, you could have said. So
great face paint, though. They always had great face.
I loved the entrance music. Like I love those guys. Like,
the entrance music too.
Oh, it was that was a team.
3 good theme songs here too with the Hulkamaniacs.
That's true. I was hoping we'd get that that Jake and Hogan feud. Just never happened. But like you said, there was a reason why for that. All right. That's yours. Like you said, we easily transition into your number 6. I will go to mine, and we're going to stay in the 80s here. We're going to go back to the main event, the very first Survivor Series, the winners of the very first main event. This is one of those teams that I sort of forgot about until I went back and looked around. I was like, how did I forget about this team? Because it was the first Survivor Series, and this was, Hogan was running wild, but Andre the Giant, Rick Rude, King Kong Bundy, Butch Reed, and One Man Gang. You talk about a team of heels. Holy, like that team right there. You have got just a complete, like, these are 5 guys I think I'd put up against anyone, like, just with the team itself. My goodness, they were just, what a roster. And of course, the thing is too, you had Heenan and Slick, so those were the managers that were involved with that team. Like, this is just, I feel like I should even put this team a little bit higher because I've got them at 6, but holy cow, like, this is just, what a squad here of just heels, just roughhouse guys that are going to try to just beat the shit out of you.
That is a solid pick right there. I did not have them on my list, actually, because, some of the WWF runs weren't quite what you would have hoped they would be. Butch Reed probably should have done a lot better in WWF, and didn't quite pan out. And the One Man Gang, man, solid work, or don't get me wrong, but once he made that Akeem transition, oh gosh, I don't know. That doesn't age well either when you go back and watch that stuff. Like, ooh, woof. Not great. But certainly Andre, Bundy, and Rude. Oh, yeah. Good stuff.
No surprise that I have Rude on here multiple times. Man, Rick Rude, what a gem. I look at that team and I was like, God, these are all like just heels, and like you said though, probably Butch Reed by that point, and even Gang, like their work rate rise, like this probably wasn't it, but still, I don't know.
Well, not to mention Andre too.
Well, I was gonna say I was trying not to put Andre in that group, but I think it's.
And Hogan had a weird team too. I think he had like Ken Patera on that team. He had Paul Orndorff, after all they've been through, was on that team. Hogan was he just kind of threw something there. Bam Bam Bigelow there during his brief early run. It was a hodgepodge kind of selection that Hogan had there.
There's
Not
a
one
reason.
of his better teams.
I was gonna
I
say
would
there's
say.
a reason his team lost in that one. It's because he had Don Morocco, Bam Bam,
Don Morag, The Rock, yeah.
and then he had
Bunch of people you didn't
Orndorff.
trust.
Yeah, like Orndorff. Like, what the hell's he got Orndorff on the team for? This guy was, I don't know. So
It was even weirder when Piper and Snuka together, and at least Piper and Snuka were crazy enough where you would think they would team.
yeah, that was just bad call on Hogan. At least he learned, right? He learned. He put Jake and Axe and Smash on there a couple of years later, so he figured it out eventually. So good for him. All right, so now we've made it to the top 5 here. This is where things get good. All right, you're number 5.
Well, number 5. I mean, you know that early editions of the Survivor Series, there was always a ton of talent on these shows managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan. The Heenan family was a big part of WWF during this time period, and it seemed like every heel wrestler had somebody managing them. That's what they did. But so Bobby would always have a team on this show, and for my money, my personal favorite edition, we're going back to 1989, of course, because you had Andre the Giant, of course, you had Haku, which Haku's wrestling legacy has kind of been eclipsed by his legacy outside the ring of being like the biggest badass of all time, I think.
Yes.
We don't really think of Haku's in-ring stuff anymore. We just think of Haku being a badass. That's what we associate with him now. And the 2 other men on this tag team, of course, Arn Anderson was there, and Tully Blanchard was supposed to be the 4th. Unfortunately, Tully Blanchard failed a drug test, and he left wrestling for a very long time. So old Bobby the Brain himself had to fill in.
This is just there you go. You talk about symmetry. This is my number 5 as well. So there we go. Like we nailed these 5, or this one at number 5 at least. I was thinking about that. I actually watched that one not too long ago. I watched 89. I don't remember. It's probably a couple months ago, but I remember I was just like, man, if you had to have a replacement for Tully, just throw Bobby in there. You know the role he's going to play, and sure enough, I thought it was great just to have him on this group. And you talk about just a group of talent. Oh, man. Andre, like we said, work rate rise at this point. Not great. But Haku, Arn, you had some this is like the enforcer group here, where you've got just Haku and Arn and Andre. Then, of course, Heenan stepping in. But,
the thing is, Bobby was past his prime at this point. I mean, he was up there in years. He had done some wrestling off and on, but apparently, though, I mean, I've always been told if you go back to like the 1970s when Bobby was more of an in-ring competitor, he was as good a worker as the guys he managed. We're talking about guys like Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel, for God's sakes. I mean,
right.
No slouches, but Bobby was apparently just as good as all of them at the whole in-ring aspect and the performing and getting his shit kicked out. I mean, he was great at that.
Yeah, he was, and that's I love that team. But I know they got beat. Who was it? I think it was Warrior, the Rockers, and Neidhart. I think that was the team that beat him.
Yeah, that sounds right. And yeah, they had Brett and Jim on different teams for some reason.
I thought that was strange. Yeah, they did that. Like I said, you had like Axe and Smash on the same team, and then you had Brett. Brett was on a team. He was on the 4x4s, which, by the way, just spoiler alert, they're not going to be on my list here. It was Duggan, Brett, Garvin, and Hercules. Big Herc fan, but sorry.
I see. I think there was a picture with them all carrying 2x4s too. So.
Yeah. There you go.
That's pretty good.
Big Jim Duggan. Good recruiter there to get Brett in there. So, all right. So we both have that at number 5. Heenan, Andre, Haku, and Arn, the Heenan family, 1989. So that brings us back to you for number 4.
And number 4, we're going to go back to a team that you had on your list earlier, Team Guerrero, of course.
Yes.
Eddie Guerrero, The Big Show, John Cena, Rob Van Dam. You're talking about 4 top talents right there. Eddie was at the top of his game. Big Show was making waves at this point. I mean, John Cena, he wasn't quite Big Match John just yet. He was getting there. He was moving his way up. He was the Doctor of Thugonomics and kicking ass, taking names. And RVD was still doing some good stuff at this point. The thing about this is, now, of course, Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle had some issues throughout that year, so they were picking teams to be a Survivor Series. And Kurt Angle had the likes of Luther Reigns and Mark Jindrak on his team. Why did he think that was going to work? Carlito was also there. What? I mean, are you talking about guys who weren't great recruiters? I think you have to add Kurt Angle to that list because, man, he was scraping bottom of the barrel at this group. Jeez, old Pete's.
I was going to say, if we would have did a top 10 on the team captains, I think that, I don't know, some of these guys are like, I'm like, how are they recruiting some of these guys on their teams? Like, what are they thinking?
Kurt wasn't a good recruiter, and I'll also mention the Honky Tonk Man had some of the worst teams out there.
Yeah, well, I was looking back at this. I just pulled up Survivor Series '04, and I remember that like Angle was the big heel in that one with the team. But I looked at the main event, and you talk about an interesting main event, which again these teams are not going to be on the list. But you had Randy Orton, Benoit, Jericho, and Maven taking on Triple H, Batista, Edge, and Snitsky. So I don't. You could have just did like a 6-man tag, put Maven versus Snitsky in a singles match, and called it a day there.
I looked at both those teams as well, and you can kind of tell why they made. There were a couple weak links there. Let's be honest.
Just a few. All right, that I like that one. That's a good one. Like I said, I probably could have put that one a little bit higher, maybe above that Andre, Butch, Bundy, Gang, Rude. But those guys, they know the way to my love. All right, number 4. This is one I'm going to assume you probably have on your list too, because I think this is one that's sort of like that universal where you're like, man, this team, what a team this is. We're getting out of the 80s, but we're not going too far. 1990, the Warriors, the Ultimate Warrior, Kerry Von Erich, and the Legion of Doom. Now, what a backstory here with this group and kind of where they came from. And then, of course, it's like, early 90s here, and you think about where all these people were at that point. The most sad thing to me, Steve, I guess, is that this entire group is gone. And, man, that's just brutal because... That's
true. They're all no longer with us. That's a true story.
1990, the Warriors, what a team that was.
That is a good team, and it was such a good team that, guess what? My number 3 team?
Look at that.
The Warriors. That's right. The Ultimate Warrior, Texas Tornado, the Legion of Doom. And, it's great symmetry, too, because you might recall back when Kerry Von Erich was in World Class, of course, making his name, he liked to call himself the modern-day Warrior.
Right.
He had that classic theme song by Rush, and... you might recall that the Legion of Doom, I don't think I'm spoiling anything here. You might recall before they came to WWF, they were known as the Road Warriors.
Wow, look at that.
And that's the whole reason that the Dingo Warrior became a warrior in the first place was because Warriors are pretty popular.
Yep. What do you know?
And the reason you might recall, you probably heard the story where Vince McMahon was thinking about what to call this guy, because he didn't want to call him the Dingo Warrior because, for God's sakes, that's awful. But he was thinking, well, he's not the modern day warrior. He's not the Road Warrior. He's the Ultimate Warrior.
Ultimate Warrior.
There it is. Ultimate Warrior. Bam. We're done. Okay. So, that is a solid team right there.
That team has the best symmetry maybe of any group on this entire, like any Survivor team ever. Like just because of the symmetry there, like you mentioned, with all the name tie-ins and everything. I don't know that anyone could beat that just from a symmetry standpoint. Maybe not just full-on talent, but symmetry, man, that's a group right there. All right, my number 3, we're going to go back to one you mentioned earlier. I have them pretty high on this list, and maybe it's because just, right in my wheelhouse, 2001, what a group. You mentioned earlier, Team WWF, Rock, Taker, Kane, Jericho, Show. I just thought, man, from a talent standpoint, that's just that's a group, and we already kind of covered that the Alliance didn't do so well, but that is the number 3 that I have on my list, just because, you've got 5 Hall of Famers right there probably, so pretty good group there at number 3, which leads us to, man, we're into the top 2 now. This is going to be interesting to see where you go here with number 2, because I don't know, like maybe I just have some bias, but I'm starting to think maybe we have a different top 2, but I also think there may be one in there that we have the same. All right, number 2.
Well, I will say that my number 2 appeared earlier on your list, and we're talking about that tag team from 1987 with Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat and Jake Roberts, Jim Duggan, Bruce Beefcake. And I don't think we really delved into it too much earlier, but the most interesting thing about this team to me is we all remember the feud earlier that year between Savage and Steamboat. Those two guys went at it, and that feud is still one of the most remembered feuds to this day. And to think that they're on the same team by the end of 1987 is something else. But also, if you go back to 1986, we had the big feud between Ricky Steamboat and Jake Roberts, the Dragon versus the Snake. Savage and Roberts had issues before, and they would have issues later on.
Yeah, that is true.
So the fact that these 3 guys could get along long enough to be on the same team, and I can only think of one thing that could have possibly brought these 3 guys together. And that's a mutual hatred of the Honky Tonk Man.
Yes, that's true. I didn't think about that.
They all hated Honky Tonk Man. Honky Tonk beat Steamboat for the title. He kept bragging about being the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. He tried to hit Elizabeth with a guitar, and we saw what he did to Jake. Pretty much messed up the neck for the rest of his career. So the only possible things that could bring those three guys together was that freaking honky tonk man.
Oh.
And if I remember correctly, I want to say that Savage, Steamboat, and Roberts were the three survivors there. I believe that's what happened there.
I think that's correct. Yeah, because I know Savage and Steamboat, but yeah, I want to say Roberts was too. That would have been right. So, yeah, that's like I said, it's, I don't know, like you look back at that era, like for that year in particular, like having all of those guys on the same team, man, that's, yeah, maybe I should put them a little higher too, because I think back and I'm like, that was like in these guys' wheelhouse, like right here in that year. And then, of course, the feuds and everything they had going on. What a crew that is. So, all right. My number 2, and that tells me, and I forgot that you had mentioned that you still had that one on your list, but my number 2 is not even on your list at all, but I'm just going to say it up front. This is a personal bias. This is one that, look, it's my list. I realize they're not going to be this high on everyone else's list, but I had to put this team in here because I think they're my favorite Survivor Series team name ever. Rude's Brood is number 2. They had Jacques and Raymond Rougeau on there. Mr. Perfect, Rick Rude. You had the Genius and Jimmy Hart as the managers. They beat Roddy's Rowdies. I teased it earlier, but this is the greatest team name in the history of Survivor Series, in my opinion, so I had to put them on this list, and obviously I put them very high. You see their little picture. I remember they used to take the team pictures, like you said, with the Duggan and the 4x4s and everything. Their team picture just screams like we are better than everyone on this planet. And so there you go. Rude's Brood, number 2.
No, I mean, I don't. They're not on my list, obviously, but that's not. I don't have a problem with them. I don't have a problem with the Rougeaus either, quite frankly. I mean, the one thing I always, and you don't want to have problems with the Rougeaus, those are two connected people, if you know what I'm saying. I think they have some connections that you might not want to be on the wrong side of, if you get my drift. But I also put the Rougeaus over for, especially Jacques. Jacques always had some of the greatest theme music of all time.
Yeah.
He was always singing songs about, he sung about being an all-American boy. He was singing about being the Mountie and then not being the Mountie. It's just one of the great things about the Rougeaus is just the great theme music. Always loved that. Of course, Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, they had a long history together. And they were always really tight as part of Heenan's family. Then later on in WCW, we'd see them reunite, and they'd always be coming out together. Rude was always by Hennick's side. So, yeah, nothing wrong with that right there. Yeah. And they did beat the Rowdies. I think, unfortunately, as much as we love the chaos and the so the craziness of Roddy's team, and that ultimately it wasn't going to work out too well.
No, you had Rude's Brood. Those guys were the ultimate heels, and they were going to figure it out. But I love the Rougeau's theme music. It was just, and then of course they had the little American flags. Like they were just, they were over the top, but they were great. And then the two ultimate heels with Perfect and Rude. So I just love that team. So that's why I have them probably higher on my list than some people will, just because I love the name and I just love the collection here of just heels. Something about that. All right, number 1. And I don't know, we may have the same one, but I feel like this team would have to be on the top 10 of anyone's. So I'm starting to think that we do have the same number 1. But Steve, I will let you unveil yours first.
Well, we'll find out. This is one of the most interesting teams out there. I mean, you would to think in 2020 that all these guys were ever on the same team is something confusing to think about. But I remember 2006. There was Edge and Randy Orton had formed the team. They were trying to challenge Degeneration X for supremacy. Shawn Michaels and Triple H were doing stuff, and they both formed teams for Survivor Series. And quite frankly, Edge and Randy Orton they came up with Johnny Nitro before he was good, Mike Knox, Gregory Helms. Not the best grouping there, but DX did a little bit better. Shawn Michaels and Triple H, they found 3 guys. I mean, we're the Hardy Boys, for God's sakes. Long-standing rivals of Edge, of course. And, they were Team Extreme, part of that same kind of time period. So those 4 guys all kind of mixed together pretty well. And then he had this youngster who was part of ECW, working his way up the ranks, starting to turn some heads. I remember he got a chance before this match even started because a young man by the name of CM Punk was starting to gain the attention of the wrestling world. And to think, nowadays that CM Punk and Triple H and Shawn Michaels are ever on the same team. Oh, boy. Wow.
Yeah.
But, yes, it happened. It happened back in 2006. And, Yeah, even then, Triple H can try to steal a little bit of the kid's heat before a match too. I mean, it's crazy, crazy times. But yeah, I mean, and if I remember correctly, I think that they all survived.
I think that's right. I was actually pulling this up while you were talking. I'm pretty sure all 5 of them were still in there.
Because you see that team that team that Edge and Orton came up with. My gosh.
Oh yes, here it is. Yeah, it was a clean sweep, and the thing is, it was a clean sweep in 11 minutes and 30 seconds, according to Wikipedia here. So they did just a clean sweep on this group in 11 minutes. That tells you how good this team was. And no suspense needed. This is my number 1 team, too, on my list, because I just think back, I'm like, oh my goodness, like Triple H, Shawn, Punk, like you said, he was just starting to sort of come into his own, at least on the WWE level. I think a lot of people would kind of, known his work. Yeah, but I guess still, it's at the same time, once you reach that level, it's like this guy, of course, took off from there. And the Hardys, I mean, even the Hardys at that point, like, I mean, they're still, like, these guys are still wrestling. Like, we're 14 years later. And it's just like, so, I don't know, man. This is one of those teams that I just look around, I'm like, how you can stack this team up against anyone, because all of these, like, all 5 of these guys, given what they've done in their career, again, knowing what CM Punk was going to go on to do, knowing what the Hardys had already accomplished at that point, they do more. And then, of course, Triple H and Shawn. I mean, Shawn goes on to have, arguably in some people's minds, the best WrestleMania match ever with Taker. And, Triple H is basically running the company here. So, yeah, quite a power group there with those 5.
A selection of talent, to be sure. And also, it's still kind of weird to think that Triple H and CM Punk were ever on the same side.
Yeah.
My gosh.
That is true. I didn't think about that. Listen, there was another team on this group, and I'm laughing because I'm pulling up the card here in 2006. I forgot about this, but I found them when I was doing, trying to figure out my top 10. I completely forgot until I started researching this that Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Sergeant Slaughter, and Ron Simmons took on the Spirit Squad. I forgot that was the team. I was trying to think. I was like, who was it that faced the Spirit Squad? Because I knew they were still, like, at this point, I was like, okay, these guys are still doing something. I was like, who did they face? And then I pulled it up. I was like, are you serious? I barely remember it, but even Arn was their manager, I think, at that point.
Yeah,
too.
Arn was the manager. And I remember I want to say it was around the same time where Flair and Roddy Piper won the tag team titles.
That's right. I forgot about that. Oh, my goodness.
In 2006. It wasn't exactly not the best we've ever seen of Flair and Piper. Let's just say that. I mean,
I think Punk was probably, we talk about guys kind of coming into their own. I don't think Flair and Piper were probably coming into their own in 2006. But
no, they come to their own about 30 years prior.
Oh, God. I forgot it. Like 10 minutes. They beat him in 10 minutes. I'm looking here. 10 minutes, 31 seconds. I'm
kind of thinking now I'm wondering how old they would have been in 2006. And I almost want to compare them to some of the guys that WWE puts in main events now.
That's true. I mean, man,
some of these guys are getting up there.
I was going to say, the only one I remember coming back, it was Steamboat. Steamboat had that, what was it, against Jericho?
He had that real great comeback run there for a couple months where he kind of, he wasn't quite the old dragon, but he was still damn good.
That's the only one I remember thinking, like, man, this guy came back and Steamboat stepped in the ring. It's like, oh my God, like, this guy hasn't aged a bit. But yeah, that was an interesting group there. But I have to agree, Team DX, that is number 1 on our list. And again, their objective lists. We thought it'd be fun to do this heading into Survivor Series because, Steve, I don't really know about this Survivor Series as we're still recording this basically a week ahead of time before we even know probably the full card at this point. But I don't know. Like these we talked about it on the previous podcast, sort of the champion versus champion thing. Sometimes you back yourself in the corner. You don't really know which way you're going to go. On paper, like this card, you're getting the champion matches, but it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how many people are invested because it's the draft too, and we brought that up. Like, some of these, you just do the draft so close to it that we're supposed to believe that, AJ Styles is out here, just anyone fighting for these groups where they've been on the brand for 2 weeks. I don't know, man. I just...
And the obsession over the captain thing, too, has gotten to be way too much. Like, it was easier back in the day when you had team names where you could figure out who the captain was already.
Yeah, like bring back the team names.
Rude, Roddy's. Those easy figure outs. And now everybody, I need to be the captain. And what happens does being the captain actually mean anything? Do you get anything special if your team wins for being the captain? Not that I know of.
Jim Ross in '88 would have said the champion's purse. Like he would have brought up like $15,000, the team captain. Like that's the kind of stuff I want. But like even thinking about it, I feel like everyone, and we didn't mention this guy one time, but I feel like everyone now, like on these teams, is like the next Bad News Brown. Like everyone's just gonna walk out, right? Like I feel like that's the way they play it up every year. Like everyone hates each other, no one likes each other, and it's like, okay, who's gonna be the first guy to walk out? Like I feel like they're putting everyone in the Bad News Brown role every single year now. So
I was talking about Bad News Brown earlier with some people actually, because we were remembering that Survivor Series gimmick he had, where I wonder why. I mean, okay, it's okay the one time he walks out. But then why was he recruited to a team the next year?
I know, like back
Like,
to back
did somebody
years.
really think, oh, I can make him change. I can make him be a team player? No, that was never going to happen. Come on now. Bad News Brown, a man, criminally underrated too. Never got the full push that he deserved because that man was a badass.
Oh, he was great. Yeah, I kept thinking about that. I'm like, literally everything they do now, almost it feels like none of the team likes each other, and everyone's just like, okay, we don't want to be here. And I'm like, come on, like that's what we talk about. Some of those teams, like you had either these 5 ultimate faces or 5 ultimate heels or 4 or whatever. I don't know. Let me ask you this, because that's something I just thought about. I was like, we had so many 80s on our group here. Did you, which now they couldn't do it because they don't do enough matches, but I loved the like elimination thing where you had whoever was the survivors at the end of the matches. Like then at the end you'd have like this, put everybody on the same team, and then you like what was the year they did that? Was that 89?
That was 1990.
90.
Yes,
that's
that.
right. Hogan, I think it was Hogan, Warrior, and Tito. I want to say was the ones that
it was the and they went off. They went against I want to say DiBiase was there.
Yeah.
And I remember the Visionaries made the cut because the Visionaries did a clean sweep. Is Rick Rude and Power and Glory and who was the fourth?
I've got to pull this up because I was trying to think of it earlier.
Struggling to think who the fourth was. I remember being the first time that there's a clean sweep in the Survivor Series.
Oh, it was Warlord. So you had
Warlord that's
and Martel.
Right, yeah.
It was
an awful random team to do that as well when you think about it.
It was. I say it wound up being 3-on-5. So they took the survivors from the other team. So it was Hogan, Tito, Warrior. Against DiBiase, it was Power and Glory, Martel, and Warlord. So, yeah, it only lasted 9 minutes. So they were probably
they'd already worked earlier.
I was going to say they were probably like, "Why did we do this?" And that's why we didn't see it again because it was like
that's why it never happened again. Yeah, because they decided it's a bad idea there. And then of course 1990. I think we all remember 1990 Survivor Series for a couple of reasons.
Yes.
One, which we keep. 30th anniversary of The Undertaker, yada yada. But there's another guy who debuted on that show, which is still remembered to this day as one of the greatest moments in Survivor Series history. And of course, I speak of the debut of the big egg hatching and popping out the gobbledygooker.
The gobbledygooker, man.
Yes. Oh,
that's
tremendous.
Yeah. That would be number 1 on our list of Survivor Series debuts, I think, if we had one of those.
Yeah, Undertaker would be a close second, actually.
Yeah, it may be close. That was incredible. I'm thinking of the late Mean Gene, man. Just him trying to sell this thing was just.
When that thing was put together, that all the drugs were being consumed by the bookers. All the drugs.
Oh gosh. Well, at least they figured out how to put teams together and put team names on there that made sense, and at least they did a good job with that. But, all right, well, there you go. There are our top 10 lists. Let us know what you think. Hit us up on Twitter, 411, whatever you want to do. Just let us know. What are some of your favorite Survivor Series teams in history? We thought it'd be fun to do that. Steve, I guess nothing else too exciting. I guess we do need to just touch on this real quick. Zelina Vega, which has nothing to do with Survivor Series because she won't be there. But what'd you think of how this whole thing went down there with her?
Well, you knew it was going to happen at some point when WWE started putting their foot down about this third-party business with Twitch and Cameo and all these sites where, where the wrestlers were using their likeness to, get a little money on the side is what it is. I mean, not something I have a problem with myself, but, WWE wants all the money that talent make off such things because they're a corporation and corporations like money. So that's kind of how it goes there. And Zelina was one of the people that they weren't going to play along with it. She stood up for herself. She kept doing the Twitch thing. She even made her OnlyFans site. So she was standing up to the company, and the company made a decision that you would expect them to make. And they're not going to win this PR battle either because,
Yeah.
I mean, are we going to side with, are you going to side with Zelina Vega here or with WWE? I think that's an easy choice for most people.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be some that fall in line behind Vince and yada, yada, yada. But Zelina seems 100% in the right to me. And apparently, I mean, I guess she does as well off these sites as well as she does off WWE, which doesn't say a lot for how they're paying people over there. I don't know.
I was going to bring that up. Like, I think that's the most fascinating part of this is, all these reports talking about how, she does probably make more money off of that than she does her actual WWE contract. And, like, I'm thinking, how many others could do the same? And, I mean, I don't know. Like,
I think there could be quite a few.
I was going to say, like, I'm wondering kind of what the next move is for others, which I know everybody's going to talk about what's going to, where's she going to go? I know she's got the 90-day no-compete thing, and everybody's saying, well, she go back to Impact, she go to AEW, where does she go? But I think there'll be high demand, obviously, for her. But I wonder how many others will look at the same way and say, you know what? We get out of this contract, and, I mean, even if WWE doesn't go back, which everybody always is kind of talking about the live events and stuff, even if WWE doesn't go back to doing the live events, traveling however many days a year, 300 days a year, a lot of people say, man, that schedule, and, well, what if I could do this? I could do the same thing, like Zelina Vega's doing, obviously different, but, and not have to deal with all this, and just say, hey, I'm going to make my money this way, I can go work for an AEW or an Impact, and maybe not have that type of schedule. I don't know, man. I look at it and I'm like, I wonder how many more of these people are going to try to do this same thing because it's different, which again, everybody has different goals, I think, in their careers, but for someone like her, this is the perfect move. And then I wonder for others, I don't know, there has to be some incentive there to think about, man, that this is a possibility for us now.
Well, this is far from the end of the story.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of other stuff that happen. The fallout from this, and there'll be other people that will make decisions. And we've already heard about, Zelina Vega, of course, married to Aleister Black.
Yeah.
And that's a whole issue, too. I mean, Aleister's still under contract. And there's reports that he wanted to go back to NXT, and WWE shot him down on that. And quite frankly, I'd be surprised WWE did much of anything with Aleister Black for the next however long he's employed.
Maybe put him through a table.
Maybe put him through a table every week. That's what they seem to like to do to people. So I don't know. He might try to find his own way out as well. I mean, I imagine I don't want to speak for people, but if I was in his position, I think I would be highly inclined to seek a way out.
Yes, probably. That's one of the things I brought up too. Is like, everybody, as soon as the Zelina Vega thing came out, of course, she had put the tweet up before, like 10 minutes before, and everyone on social media is like running with this. They're like, oh my God, they fired her over the tweet. And I'm like, you know what? I can't even blame these people because, like, this is a company I think that would do such a thing. Like, I feel like if she would have put that out and not, like, I feel like they would have fired her 10 minutes later. Like, that's the problem is they've created, I think, this sort of perception, I think, of how they run their business sometimes. And sure, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff out there that's rumor and maybe not true, but with some of the things they've done, I just think they put themselves in this position to have this PR nightmare because it's one of those things, and good for her. Like, I thought it was brilliant for her to put that tweet out there knowing and jumping
she
out.
Knew what she was doing.
Absolutely.
She absolutely knew what she was doing there. That was not an accident.
No, I thought that was just a brilliant move on her part because she knew the perception. She knew what the backlash was going to be, and everybody's going to connect to and say, oh my God, they fired her over this tweet. But that's something else. Like, this is a problem they've created, and I will say that. Like, I feel like if you're one of the people that maybe feel sorry for them, I'm just like, that they've created this own issue themselves. So.
Zero sympathy over here, none whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm with you. It's we'll see. Like you said, it's far from over. I think it'll be interesting to see what else kind of comes of this. But
a lot of other things go on, and I mean, considering some of the political things going on these days, let's be honest. WWE is not quite in the same position they were this time last month.
Yep, that is very true. Very true. We'll see. We'll see where it goes from here. But, Steve, as always, I enjoy it. Anything exciting you have on the horizon that you want to plug? This is a free plug zone here, so plug away, my friend.
Well, I mean, all the usual stuff at 411mania.com, the top sevens, the botched, the I did the big Turning Point review.
Yes.
I get to do some reviews from time to time, so that's always fun. Fun little show with I saw you were a big fan of the Deonna Purrazzo Su Young matches. I was as well. Very good stuff there. I mean, we've put them over before. Impact, they're doing some good stuff over there. So
They are.
Like to see that. Shot.com, of course, a lot of other wrestling stuff over there. And 3psmag.com, I'm doing my weekly fantasy football podcast. And
yes.
As far as I can tell, this football season's going to play out. So
at least for now.
Against all better judgments, they're
yes.
going to keep on plugging. So
they're
might as well play, right?
Yep, they're pushing through. So they've made it to week 10. So we'll see. 7 weeks ago in the regular season, and we'll see what the playoffs look like.
Well, what convinced me was when Ben Roethlisberger wound up on the list, and they just kept on going, because I always thought it would take like a big name or somebody that the NFL is in love with to get on that list or get infected or whatever before they shut down. And once Big Ben got on the list and the NFL kept plugging, I figured they're good. It's okay.
Yep, they are WWE pushing right through. They're just going to keep going right through this. So
that's like Roman Reigns staying home, right?
Yes, there you go. Yep. What do you know? So check all that stuff out. As usual, Steve said we'll have the links to everything in the show notes. Check all that out there. But Steve, thanks again, and we'll do this again here soon.
All right.
Thanks again to Steve Cook for joining us here on the podcast. And as mentioned, be sure to check out all of Steve's work over at 411mania.com, his weekly columns, as well as his recent reviews. As we touched on, he did review Impact Wrestling's Turning Point show. A really good show, and I would highly recommend checking that out, as well as Steve's review on it. So you can find that over at 411mania.com. For everything else, you can also find that at 411mania.com. All of our weekly live coverage on the big shows, Raw, SmackDown, Impact Wrestling, AEW Dynamite, it's all there at 411mania, and all of our weekly columns and such as well. So check all that out, and as I continue to say, we'll include the link to the GoFundMe for Larry Zonka's family in the show notes, so continue to share that if you can. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, any podcast app you use, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, any of those. Just type in 411 on wrestling. That way you can subscribe to the podcast and get all the new episodes sent to you when they go up. For everything else, you can follow me on Twitter at WrestleBlake. And thanks as always for listening to this episode of the podcast. And we'll talk to you next time here on the 411 on Wrestling Podcast.